Hey y'all, it's Brittany. Welcome back, y'all. We are here with another installment of Makeup and Murder. And today's case that we're going to cover is going to be a case that was suggested to me by one of you. So, shout out to y'all for sending me all these suggestions. It's been super helpful in finding some lesser known cases that you guys are interested in hearing about. But this week is going to be all about Miss Catherine Willie Clark Alexander. Now, if you want to hear all about this story, this honestly led me down such a rabbit hole. I thought this was a straightforward story, interesting but straightforward. And y'all, it led me down a whole different rabbit hole that I was not prepared for. So, if you want to hear all about this story, then stay tuned. And today I'm actually giving a product that's been recently released. Everybody's buzzing about it all over TikTok, etc., etc. I am trying to give this Kat Von D Vegan Beauty Good Apple Skin Perfecting Balm a second chance. I got a shade that is a little more supposedly in my wheelhouse. More of a pink red tone than before. The other one was a pretty good match. I think this one will probably be a better match for my summer shade since I had just, I just came back from Mexico. So neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and hop into today's story. So this story is based in Eatonville, Florida. Now, can we just talk about Eatonville for a moment? Eatonville, Florida was the very first in this nation Black incorporated town. This was a town that was built by newly freed slaves. And I think this was back in 1887. But these were newly freed slaves that wanted to establish their own town, their own government. They were a self-governing Black town. Black run, Black business owned town. Can we just pause for a moment for that? So that's where this all starts. And actually, our victim in today's story was a descendant of one of the founders of the town. Catherine Willie Clark Alexander was a descendant of one of the founders of Eatonville, Florida. So she was actually a pioneer herself because she was the first female postmistress for Eatonville as well. So pioneering just ran through the bloodline, okay? And for those of you who don't know what a postmistress is, it's the person that's in charge of the post office, the actual post office. Miss Clark, being the postmistress, she's a relative of the person who started the town. They also have a street named after her family. There's Clark Street in Eatonville, Florida as well. But Eatonville was a really safe place. Everybody felt safe. Everybody knew each other. They didn't lock their doors at night. None of that kind of stuff. It was one of those kinds of towns. I am taking my Fenty Matte primer. Y'all know I love this primer. Let me know in the comments down below if y'all find some other primers that are for mattifying but work better than the Fenty. I want to try some new ones. I really love this one, but I want to try some new ones as well. Now, let's talk about Miss Catherine. Now, she was a mother. She was a grandmother. And at the time of the crime, she was 74 years old. So everybody knew her. She was well liked. She was a feisty woman. Don't get it twisted. But everybody loved her in the community. They referred to her as Mama. Now, in addition to being the postmistress, she was also the town clerk as well. So she wore many hats. She sang in her church choir. She attended church religiously. And she was just one of those people that you think of typically in the Black community as a big mama. That was who she was. So now I also have to tell you about the other main character in this story, and for more reasons than one. But we'll get to that later. But the other character in this story is Linroy Bottoson. Bottoson, I'm not sure how you say it, but I'm going with Bottoson. I'm going to take my Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Freeze Styling Wax and hold these brows up real quick. And then I'm taking my Brow Bar by Rima in dark. Now, Linroy, as a kid, grew up with a very religious parent. And his mother was so religious that she would literally only allow him to pretty much read the Bible, pray, and preach on the streets as a child. At least up until age 9, he was what you would call a child street evangelist, where he would pretty much just, preach to the people passing him by on the street on a daily basis, preaching them the word of God. Now, in 1962, he tried committing suicide while he was at his church. And when he was found, he was committed to the hospital and he was evaluated. And it was found that he had some type of brain damage and he also had latent schizophrenia. Trust the brow process, y'all. Just trust it, okay? Now I'm taking my NARS Complete Matte Concealer and I'm going to clean up my brows. Now, in 1971, after, all of this has happened, he's tried to commit suicide. He's been diagnosed with a mental illness. He commits bank robbery in 1971. So he goes to prison for that. He gets out. And then he, starts a new life. He has some kids, that kind of thing. And he later marries someone else, someone by the name of Dorothy. I told y'all, trust the brow process. Now, around 1979, when the crime took place, he, along with his wife, was running a debt counseling service in Kissimmee, Florida. So that's kind of where we're at the point of where the crime takes place. So let's get into this crime, y'all. I am going to take my Born This Way concealer in mahogany and do some color correction. So October 26, 1979 was just a normal day for Catherine. And she was just going to working at the post office, minding her business. It was a Friday. And, everybody's getting ready for, it's the weekend, the last day of the work week. And at this point, they're about halfway through their work day. It's around noon. So, getting close to being done for the day. So around lunchtime, around noon, on this beautiful Friday, a tall, skinny man with some curly hair walks into the post office. And he robs the post office of about $144 in cash. And he also takes about $14,800 in money orders from the post office. Now, the money orders are issued at the post office in $400 increments. He took 37 money orders. After he robbed the post office, I guess that wasn't enough for him because he then proceeded to march Miss Catherine right on out of the post office, broad daylight, people, going about their business outside of the post office as well as in the post office. And he doesn't have a weapon or anything, but he says something to her that obviously makes her, follow his lead and do what he says. So he's walking behind her. She whispers to 2 different people to call the police and tell them what's happening and tell them that this man just stole from the post office. After this happens, after she tells, eyewitnesses to call the police, they get into a red and white late model Ford Thunderbird and drive away. I don't know what sane person thought that was like a good idea. What sane criminal would have said, yeah, it's cool. Let me just go. I'm not going to hide my face. I'm not going to try to disguise myself in any way. I'm not going to pick a time where it's not busy and there won't be any other witnesses around. I don't know what criminal mastermind would pick broad daylight noon on a Friday at the post office to rob and abduct someone. All right, y'all. So now I am taking the Kat Von D or KVD now Good Apple Skin Protecting Balm, and I want to see how full coverage this can get. So I'm actually going to use a kind of dense foundation brush to apply this. I'm going to use my Morphe foundation brush. This looks much more up my skin tone alley. But when they got into that car, that was the last time anyone saw Miss Catherine alive. Now, 3 days later, Linroy and his wife, Dorothy, they get arrested, but they are arrested for trying to use those stolen post office money orders. So his wife, Dorothy, was the one that was actually caught trying to use it, and that led to the arrest of both of them. While they were arrested for trying to cash those money orders, they were not originally or immediately expected as suspects in the abduction of Miss Catherine. Now, about 30 minutes after Linroy and his wife were arrested, literally 30 minutes, the police locate a body down a dirt road just south of Orlando. And that body belongs to Miss Catherine Clark Alexander. When the body is examined, they find out that she has been stabbed in the abdomen and the back 16 times total. And she was also run over by a car multiple times. So she actually didn't die from being stabbed. This was a strong old woman. She was 74 years old. And she withstood the stabbing. But whoever at the time, they didn't know who it was, whoever stabbed her then took it upon themselves to run her over repeatedly. And that's unfortunately what took Miss Catherine's life. Now, while they're investigating as well, they learn that Linroy had recently leased a red and white Thunderbird that looked exactly like the Thunderbird that was seen leaving the post office with Miss Catherine in it the very same day that the post office was robbed. He had that very same car in his possession. Now I'm going to take my Vanity Makeup Sculpt and Glow palette, and I'm going to use this darkest shade to do a little contouring on my cheeks and a little bit on my nose as well. He tried to claim that, yeah, okay, so he was the one who stole the money orders from the post office, but he was not responsible for Miss Catherine's murder. He said that after he stole the post office money orders, he lent his car to someone, a friend, which I don't think was ever named, and that's the person who killed Miss Catherine. Now, doesn't make any sense because Miss Catherine was taken with those money orders. So what he was really trying to say just didn't really make any sense. So obviously police arrest him at that point. Now, also what they found when they were examining Miss Catherine was that between the time of death and the time that she was taken, they determined, she was abducted on a Friday. They didn't find her until 3 days later, Monday night. So they could tell that she had recently just passed away. So from that, they could tell that she was probably captured and she was held in the trunk of a car. And then after 3 days, she was then stabbed and then run over by the car. And the reason why they know that is because they examined the car that he actually owned, and in his car, in the undercarriage or underneath the actual car, they found biological evidence, hair fibers, clothing pieces underneath the car. They also checked in the car, and they also found a fingernail tip that eventually linked back to Miss Catherine. So now I am going to take my new Hourglass translucent powder. I'm going to try this out. This is the Veil translucent powder for my under eye area. And then I'm going to use my good old Laura Mercier Deep for the rest of my face. Now at the trial, his now ex-wife, Dorothy, She testified against him, along with his minister, who he confessed to, and also a inmate who said that he confessed to him as well and had said, the best witness is a dead witness. He also mentioned to his minister that the demons made him do it. Some demons got on him and they made him commit the crime. Needless to say, no one at the trial believed that he was innocent. So he was convicted of the murder of Miss Catherine Willie Clark Alexander. He's convicted, and in 1981, he is sentenced to death and he is put on death row. Now, this is where the rabbit hole begins, y'all, because there is a whole legal side to this, a legal aspect to being put on death row, being mentally ill, that kind of thing. Was he wrongfully placed on death row because of his mental illness? All these different kind of things. That's where the rabbit hole led to for me. We know he committed the crime. We know that there is physical evidence that supports that he actually committed this crime. But there is so much more to this story. Now I am taking my Revolution Gold bronzer and I'm going to bronze up the face and nose. So his lawyers felt that he should not be put to death and he should not be on death row because he had a mental illness. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it was also mentioned that he had some type of brain damage as well. So obviously there's laws in place that you cannot put to death anyone that is mentally ill or anyone that doesn't have the intellectual capacity to understand the crime that they committed and the repercussions of that crime, and then the reason why they're being put to death. So with all that being said, the lawyers obviously felt like he was a person that did not deserve to be put to death. He should be getting treatment or be in a mental facility, XYZ, you know what I'm saying. And he would say things when he was being examined by, the doctors. He would say things like, well, if I go stand over Miss Catherine's grave, she will rise from the dead and I won't be put to death. And obviously I won't be, still convicted of her murder. He would also say things like, he could speak directly to God and he can hear God. He was put here to fight a terrorist attack, and Jeb Bush would be forced, who was the governor of Florida at the time, he would be forced to work with Linroy because he had these abilities. It felt like there was some, valid claims, valid reasoning behind his attorneys wanting to be heard about his mental capacity, his mental illness that he had. Now I'm going to do a really quick natural eye look with my Nubian palette from Juvia's Place. Jeb Bush did approve a stay for him, and they did the stay to examine his mental capacity. So they had doctors check him out, and he was making all of these religious claims that, he could talk to God, that kind of thing. He can hear God talking to him, and things that probably the normal person is not going to say. And what the psychologist ended up saying was, yeah, he's making these claims, but there are a whole lot of normal television evangelists and that kind of thing who are saying the very same thing. So are we calling those people insane as well? And, you're opening up a whole different can of worms if you are. So at the end of the evaluation, he was deemed sane. They said he understood what was going on. He understood why he was being put to death. He understood what he did and why it was wrong. So that claim did not work for him. Apparently, he had some severe or some type of brain damage they wanted to check his mental capacity. So they checked that as well. They said that he seems to have normal adoptive behavior, living normally. His IQ test, which we know is trash, it's not real science, but his IQ test came back okay. Those are the two reasons that they won't put you to death on death row: if you're mentally challenged or if you have a mental illness. And he was cleared on both of those fronts. So that stay was lifted. Whole nother rabbit hole, a whole different argument for him as well. So there was a case in Arizona, and the defendant was Ring. I didn't get the full name when I was doing the research, but it was Ring. So there was a case that eventually went to the Supreme Court. So the case was really arguing that the state of Arizona has this law that allows, or a statute that allows them, in cases where the death penalty is an option, it allows for the trial judge to make factual findings that are essential to determining whether the death penalty should be implicated or not. Most felt that should be done by a jury because for your Sixth Amendment, pretty much the ability to have a trial by a jury. That's not the way it works if you're allowing the judge to make the decisions in whether or not you get the death penalty versus allowing the actual jury to make those findings that are essential in making that decision. So things like intellectual disability, having a mental illness, those things, they wanted that to be weighed by the jury and not by a single trial judge. So they felt that that was a violation of a defendant's Sixth Amendment. And that went to the Supreme Court. And when that went to the Supreme Court, Linroy Bottoson's attorneys immediately applied for a stay to wait and see what came out of this case within the Supreme Court. They were actually granted the stay pending the outcome of the case. And in the outcome of the case, the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of the defendant that their Sixth Amendment was violated. So that was a big win. So obviously the attorneys of Linroy Bottoson also felt like, okay, we got to stay already. They said that it was wrong in Arizona. So of course it's going to be wrong in Florida. The Supreme Court is the U.S. Supreme Court, regardless of the state. So they were hopeful that he would get taken off death row and put in prison for life or put into a mental facility. But that didn't happen. So the Supreme Court ended up actually lifting the stay and not providing a reason why. And because that stay was lifted, Florida quickly gave him a date for execution. When the attorneys for Linroy Bottoson went and tried to file their own motion with the Supreme Court for the same reasons of the Ring case, they denied it, and they actually used Bottoson's case to quote for any other case that came in after that tried to use the Ring case as a grounds for not being on death row. So eventually he was put to death in December of 2002. And he was put to death by lethal injection. Now I'm using my Sephora Tiger Lily Blush. And then I am taking my Becca Chocolate Geode highlighter, and I'm just going to highlight the cheekbones. And then finally, I'm going to take my Fenty Beauty. This is the Honey Waffles Gloss Bomb Cream. All right, you guys. So this is the final look. I like it. I love this balm, the new balm. I found the right shade for me. It looks much better on the skin. It's very matte, which is what I need. And I think it is good. I'm about to take the kids to the zoo. We'll see how that goes. I'll update y'all in the next video on how it withstood the heat. It's going to be about 80 degrees today. So we'll see, y'all. We'll see. I hope I don't turn into a greasy mess. You know how the bombs be. But so far, so good. This looks beautiful. This looks natural. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And then also to wrap up this story, the legal battle for Linroy Bottoson and the mental health fight and the being mentally challenged, all of that stuff, that ended up giving him 4 different stays before he was actually executed. But much after his execution in 2016, Florida finally came to the understanding that, yeah, this law is probably not the best, where the trial judge gets to make those essential decisions in a death penalty case versus the actual jury that convicted him. It violates the 6th Amendment, but it was 14 years after Linroy Bottoson had been put to death. So there's this whole big thing about, should mentally challenged people, should mentally ill people, he's already actually been diagnosed, should he have been put to death in the first place? And then this law being now obsolete, should he have been put to death in that way as well? He's a murderer. He's a bad person. He killed the beloved Catherine Alexander, but the punishment is what was in question. It was never the crime. We knew he did the crime. We knew that he was trash for that. But it's the punishment thereafter and his condition and how that played into it. So that's the rabbit hole that I got drawn down into, y'all. In 2001, the post office that she had worked in for so many years was actually dedicated and named after her. So that was very nice for the family. They finally got closure. They wanted him to be put to death because of what he did to their family, obviously. So they finally got some closure. They caught the person really quickly, which was good. You don't see that a lot in the stories that we talk about. So I am very happy that the family got closure. It was such a tragic event. She was a well-loved person in the community. And, there's the other side to it about this death penalty being applied to those who don't necessarily fit the mold of what that law is or was written for. So, y'all, all to say, that is the story. I hope you guys enjoyed it today. Make sure you make sure you subscribe if you have not already. Stop creeping. And make sure you guys comment. I love chatting with y'all. Give me more suggestions. This was definitely a surprising story for me that took me in a whole different direction than what I was expecting. So stay tuned for more to come, y'all. I'll see y'all next week. But until then, it's been fun. It's been real. And until next time, y'all, love you guys. Bye.